What is up, everybody? It's Matt Johnson. We are back with another episode of Real Estate Uncensored. This is the place where you get actionable ideas, insight, and inspiration to turn your real estate career into a life of freedom. And as always, we have amazing guests, but some of our favorite people are with us today. We have Dr. Debra Dupree, who is back with us. We're going to be talking about emotional intelligence and how to build deeper, lasting connections with your prospects and clients, how to know kind of when you need to build more rapport before we move into other parts of the sales conversation. And then, as always, we'll dive into some other stuff. We also have Gene Volpe here, who has a really killer tech tip. And then I think Greg and him are going to duke it out a little bit, because Greg is already overflowing, like squeezing a kitchen rag of water. Greg is already overflowing and exploding with other social media and tech tips. And so I think, Deborah, you and I can just essentially take this episode off, and we're just going to let Greg and Gene go at it with their social media and tech tips. But anyway, we've got a fun episode lined up for today. So first of all, the junior grandmaster himself is in the co-pilot seat where he so belongs. Greg McDaniel, what's up today?
Matt Johnson. I am. I came to a revelation in the last couple of days, and I've tried to be a very, safety conscious, law-abiding citizen. You stay within certain speed limits and stuff like that with my new SRT8. But I have found, Matt, now that my Jeep is a part of my family, it has to be treated with reverence and respect and everything else. And it is throwing a temper tantrum when it goes slow. So I said, okay, I have found that the car just wants to go fast, so we shall go fast at all times. It really does, dude. I'm not kidding you. Like, when I'm just putting along, the thing gets pissed. It's like dropping in and out of different gears, and it's like, dude, just pick a fucking speed and let's go. I'm like, all right, fine. We're out of here. It's really fun. It's a much happier car now. It just smiles. Smiles per gallon is what I call it, not miles. It's smiles per gallon. That's a sales line that actually got me to buy the car.
Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh! So that's the big revelation that you've come to, is that you're no longer going to obey any speed and/or traffic laws. I would just like to point out, for the California Highway Patrol, that Greg lives in Alamo, California. And I can point out, if anybody would like to private message me, I can tell you the exact complex where you may wait outside his area for him to come onto the street, and I'm sure start speeding immediately.
Oh my God! Please tell them I live in Alamo and I live in the complex. They will never find me. These are not. Okay. This is not the SRT8 you want. This is not the SRT8 that you want.
All right. Well, let's officially welcome our guests. First of all, Dr. Debra, how are you today?
I'm absolutely wonderful. Happy holidays to you and everyone else listening today.
You too. So we're excited, as always, to talk to you, and we'll get to some cool stuff in a second. But just for everybody that may not have caught one of your previous episodes, just give them a brief primer on who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Basically, I work with people to claim their presence, to claim their leadership and how they come across to people, to maximize their influence and persuasion. And by taking a look at the neuroscience of how we behave, the human dynamics of human behavior, and really putting it to use in ways that make a difference in their own lives as well as in the lives of the people they serve.
Yeah, which dovetails nicely, Greg, because what we talk about, and we probably need to emphasize it more on the show, but you and I have talked about it probably behind the scenes more than on the show, is that one of the functions of being a true professional in this business is to lead people. That people want to be led, and the better leaders we become, the better we become at what we do.
Yeah, we really do. And I've been Matt, and you and I are having a massive shift in an aspect of our business lives. And going through this shift, it has brought up a lot of underlying things that we've kind of not looked at for a while, because it was easier not to look at. And I'm talking about with my team. Mm-hmm. We had a really good heart-to-heart yesterday. Everyone got a little misty-eyed. A few tears were dropped by Callahan. But it was a really needed conversation to take place, and I think that really having these going deeper and having those conversations is something that we all need to stop shying away from and start bulldogging towards, because the people around you they need to have these conversations as well. They need to hear them from you. And Hank always talks about being transparent and open and everything else, and he really is. And I really think that the honesty is something that has been lacking from our industry and from a lot of us ourselves. So I think this is going to be a good conversation for reflection in December, getting ready for 2018.
Yeah, and Deborah, we might get into one of your areas of expertise, which we don't talk a lot about on the show just because we're so aimed at sales and marketing, but the conflict part. And so that if we have time today, we'll get into it. If not, we'll save it for a future episode. But you're a specialist in mediation, arbitration, and you deal with a lot of conflict resolution. And where that ties in, I think, with what Greg is talking about, is I think there's a lot of people out there in similar situations to Greg, where they either have coworkers, brokers, or just full-on partners, like in Greg's case, where there's some conflict and some tension there that needs to be resolved. It needs to be dug out and put into the open. But I don't think most people have the tools to know how to go into that type of conversation. And so we kick the can down the road and we just don't have the conversation until it gets to the point where it kind of bursts out. And at that point, then we don't have the type of conversation we want to, because we've let the emotions build up for so long. And of course, I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. Me and Greg have those times where we just explode on one another because we've let things build up over time. But we're usually pretty good at getting out of that. So I'd love to talk about that later on in the show today. But let's bring quickly the evil bald ninja, the Volpinator himself, Gene Volpe. How are you?
Matt Johnson, I'm great. I'm just sitting here like, you talking some deep stuff, and I'm like, hey, look, it's snowing outside. I don't belong on this show, man.
You're the plucky comic relief.
Thank you. I'll take what I can get when I can get it, my man. I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm good. And by the way, we both know, because we've had conversations behind the scenes, that you can go every bit as deep. I appreciate that you kind of like take the back seat and you sit back and like you observe and whatever, but like I can see it. Like I know that your mind's spinning and you have a lot that you could throw out there. You just take a back seat to the guest. So yes. Don't sell yourself short. We all know it.
I do appreciate that. I'll take that as a high compliment.
Yes, thank you. All right. So there was a really good question. Let's start off with this, and a couple of just little tactical questions that came up that I'd love to address. So the first one was from John Wenderlich, or Wenderlich. I apologize if there was an official German type pronunciation that I missed there, but this is from the Lead Gen Scription Objections group. I'm assuming it's Wenderlich. Let's just go with that. He says, who listens to music during lead gen, and does it help? And Greg, let's turn to you first, because you're obviously broadcasting your lead generation on Facebook, so people kind of get an idea of what you do.
Yeah, I have not really had a problem with broadcasting music, and I don't know why, and knock on wood, it stays that way. But what I think it is that it's a more obscure music or remixes. It's not something that you're going to hear on the radio. You're not going to hear, like a new Tim McGraw or Taylor Swift or something. If you take a major act. Yeah. I don't think that's going to really work, but I've tested. I've played like AC/DC, Disturbed, Metallica. I've played a lot of these different bands, and it has never really been an issue. Knock again. But I have found it to be an issue when I simulcast and I push it back out to YouTube. They flagged me and goes, hey, we heard this song in the background, and you're not in trouble, but don't do it again. And I'm like, oh, you're such a buzzkill, bro. But this morning I was listening to the Social Media Examiner's Friday show they do live on Facebook, and they were talking about a new thing that Facebook is doing is facebook.com /sound/collections, and you can go, there's approved music that you can go use in podcasts or live streams or stuff like that. So go take a look at that. I put the link in the show here for you guys, so just go check it out. It's pretty interesting. They got some good music too. And yes, side note, yes, it really does help to listen to music, get pumped up, to really kind of keep your mind centered. Keep motivated when you get the multiple FUs. It's kind of nice to have like sweet songs of Taylor Swift in my ears to really kind of soften the blow. I just want to see Matt's look on his face, like, huh?
I'm just
because
picturing
his
you
face. Oh my gosh.
bouncing around to Taylor Swift, like haters gonna hate.
You know the words, pal. So, what does it say about you?
Well, I mean, come on. She's tall and blonde. That's my type. It doesn't, what I'm saying? And she sings and she writes music. I mean, that's a few boxes on the top 10 list that are checked off.
I'll put a word in for you. I'll get a hold of TW.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
I'll get a hold of T-Swift for you.
Yeah. All right. Just have her text me. All right, Gene. There's a question that caught my eye too. This is from Allie O'Brien on the same Facebook group. Says, I have a few leads from Facebook ads who've only provided me with email addresses. Some are for specific listings. Some are for an open house I'm hosting this weekend. What are some things you could send them to get them to engage? I've already sent the listing and asked if they'd like to see it or send some info on the open house. So she's like already responded and kind of fulfilled the original reason that they reached out to her. But Gene, what would you do beyond that to start getting them engaged and get them to respond?
Well, certainly one element that I would engage in my engagement would be to serve them more ads. So,
okay. Yeah,
so go into Ads Manager and just start retargeting them with other different things, because part of what I realize about real estate is they sign some, they log on and they put their information in, and maybe they're just doing it to be inquisitive right now. Maybe they're not ready to pull the trigger today, but maybe 2 weeks something else presents itself. Somebody has to move, they're getting a new job, and so you want to be top of mind at the time they're ready to make that decision. So if they're halfway there, when they're fully there, you need to be there. So I would serve them more ads. That's the first thing.
Okay, I like it. Cool, Greg. Any perspective on that before we dive in with Debra on a few things?
So wait, he's getting leads, but he only has email addresses, right?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm understanding?
Yep.
You know what? I like the idea of serving more ads up to him, but take that email address, go search it in Facebook, and see if you can find the profile, and then send them maybe a video message introducing yourself. You know, 'cause it doesn't cost you any money, and it's a great way to be personal. Might be a little stalkerish if you got a hot blonde. If Taylor Swift, wants to buy a house, and Matt Johnson's the agent, and goes, well, hey there, sweet thing. I want to be your agent, and always. That's not going to work. But be a professional about it. That's a second face cover for all of you listening that I've received. But you know what?
Oh my gosh! Well, that is my move. So it's a good thing, Greg, that you pointed that out, because that was totally going to be my move.
Oh wow!
Hey,
Actually,
Greg. Greg, did I tell you I do telephonic coaching?
No. We need to explore
I'm
this.
signing Greg up for your coaching right now. I'm on your website. I'm putting in his phone number and his credit card, which I have. I'm going to put in his credit card.
He
actually
does. He actually does have my credit card. That's the scariest part about it. But
right.
So to be true about this whole message thing, I did do that. There's a reporter. She is kind of cute, but she's here in the Bay, and she friended me to go to her page or whatever. So I'm like, I've been wanting to get a hold of reporters. What's a way to stand out a little bit? So I fired up the old camcorder. Why do I keep calling it camcorder? The mic here and the lights and the camera, and I shot her a quick message. Hey, Maria, this is Greg. I'm an agent. You do not know me. Trying not to be creepy, but I told her, hey, look, I'm trying to get on air. Who to talk to? How does this work? And she'll probably never see it or never respond, but I'll let you know how it goes.
Good.
It was pretty fun, though. It was pretty easy to do, and again, it's zero-cost basis.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I want to get into is kind of how to build deeper and lasting connections to people so that you there's not a lot of that, reaching out and cold and never getting a response and stuff like that. I mean, obviously we have to do some of that, and there's going to be a measure of that to kind of draw them into that initial conversation. But I want to get into that here in a second. Gene, did you have any, you had another tip that you wanted to throw out that had to do with Waze before we move on with Debra, right?
I did. Let me just say something to that last question real quick. You can always add to have them required. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. You can ask for a phone number. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't get that out, but yes, yeah. It was awful.
You're just wowed by the snow. You're like, each one of those plates are individual.
I go back to my original statement. Oh my God, look, it's a doggy. So Waze. So this goes nicely with what Greg was talking about. Matt, I propose we start an over/under for speeding tickets in the month.
Oh yes,
right.
Yeah, I will take the over action on that.
This sounds good. So Waze, as you know, is an application that comes on your phone that you can download, and some people use Google Maps, but Waze is a way to get directions to and fro your destinations. And so now they've recently launched an advertising dashboard, basically, or a way you can start an advertising campaign with them. And what you do is log in. There's a 6-step process to get on there. You put your credit card in. I think you can start for as little as $2 a day. So you figure $60 a month, give or take. And it allows you to not only drop a pin where your business is located, but they started doing this thing where you can advertise open houses. So the thought process is, I put directions in my Waze, I'm driving up my main corridor, and your houses are popping up in real time around me on the map. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it tied into our car theme, and so it works all well together.
You know what I like about that, Gene? is that it's such a highly used app. I mean, even the ABC station here in the Bay Area, or NBC or ABC, I don't know, 3 letters. The news organization, they actually use the Waze app for traffic now. They don't use their own thing. They use the Waze app, which is really interesting, and I think this could be a huge,
It
huge
speaks
thing.
to how well local news is doing too.
Yeah, right.
Like, as you can see, traffic is busy.
Well, listen, I think if I'm not
Busy.
mistaken, I think Waze just partnered up with Lyft, and now the Lyft drivers all use the Waze app in their car.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, it never made sense to me as to why the apps built their own navigation anyway. Every Uber driver I've ever rode with has complained about Uber's navigation, and they end up using Google Maps or something else anyway.
Yep.
So that makes total sense.
Yeah.
You know, the
All
funny
right,
thing
so-
is that Waze actually never used their own navigation. When it was created, the guy was like over in Europe, and he was stuck in traffic, and he wanted to get a cab or wanted to find his way around. He's like, oh, there's got to be a way to do this. So he just mirrored the two. He went out and got navigation, and then put his software on top of it. Boom, Waze was created. $1 billion plus business right there with basically
crazy.
nothing, no infrastructure. Cool
Crazy.
story though.
Insane. All right. Well, let's dive in a little bit. First of all, Gene, how do people get in touch with you just in case you have to bail?
You know, I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to sit back and watch Dr. Debra do this. So,
Okay.
you know the jingle, GeneVolpe.com.
That's right. And the reason they should reach out to you, Gene, is that if they want to get more exposure, and especially if they want to do some of the things that you were talking about where they retarget ads to their prospects, essentially, the people that come into them through social media, they should reach out to you because you are the guy and your team can help set all that up for them, in addition to helping them get more exposure and running proactive ads out to potential clients and prospects in their area. So just want to point that out real quick.
Matt Johnson, the check is in the mail, my man.
I appreciate it. All right, I look forward to the Starbucks coffee that I'll be able to afford with that large check.
Well, I'll see you later,
I'm
Dr.
swing
Debra.
for a
Good
coffee.
luck.
All right,
Take
thanks,
care,
Gene.
Gene.
See you guys.
So Deborah,
Very good.
let's dive into a couple of things. So one of the things that I think that we can help agents with today is, let's say they're kind of meeting with that prospect for the first time, and you're really in that rapport building phase. So the thing that kind of brought this up for me, because we were going to talk about emotional intelligence today anyway, but I had a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine who was talking about the autistic spectrum, and one of the symptoms, or one of the aspects of that, is the inability to kind of, I guess, empathize with what the other person is thinking or feeling, and when it's at a certain point, you have no ability to recognize or even acknowledge or be aware of what that other person is thinking. But I think we've all been in that situation where we just can't read the other person, or we feel like we're in that situation sometimes. So I'd love to get your perspective on that. You know, how do you know when you are in rapport? How do you know when you're out of rapport? And maybe you need to spend some more time focusing on that before you start to have the conversation that can get into more of the conflict, because we all know what that feels like. You know, when you start to get into some of the things where you have to give them some hard truths and you haven't built that rapport yet, and all of a sudden you get the pullback like, wait a minute, it's that signal that, okay, I didn't build enough rapport to where I can say that, right? Like Greg and I have rapport to where we can say things to each other and we're not going to run off and, you know, cry in the woods.
Oh, maybe for you, pal, but I get a little misty when you have conversations.
All right,
Hit me
fine.
a little deep.
I need to spend some more rapport building time with Greg.
Yes, you do.
I
don't
predict
feel any
some
emotions there.
time speeding together in the SRT8.
I truly think so as well.
Yeah. All right. So, Deborah, what's your perspective on that?
Well, you've already mentioned a couple of key points, Matt, and I'm going to start off by making a distinction between empathy and sympathy. A lot of people get those two words confused, and we do know that empathy is a surefire way of making a connection, also diffusing conflict. And so let me explain what those two words actually mean. Sympathy is oftentimes where you've had a like experience, and so like you can really feel their pain, like the loss of a loved one, for example. You know, if we've lost somebody, then we can identify with how hard that is, right? And so that's really identifying with and having a deep understanding of what that emotion's like. Empathy, though, is actually something very entirely different. Empathy can be expressed whether or not you agree with it, whether or not you understand it. It's simply all about acknowledging where somebody might be coming from. I can see this is a big decision for you. It may not be to me, but it is for you. Or I can see that this news is a little surprising to you. And so that's really acknowledging what you see happening in the moment. Okay.
That's a distinction a lot of agents need to have. I mean, because everyone says, "Well, I sympathize with my clients." You need to empathize with them.
Right. Right. Yeah. Take sympathy out of it, really. But empathizing is really the key, because people then at least feel that they're being heard, and that you are recognizing where they are. Again, even if you don't agree with them, because a lot of people, and particularly when I'm working with entrepreneurs or leaders, and they go, well, I just don't get it. I'm not there with them. And so there's a disconnect then. And so by acknowledging, that's part of empathy. And so simply calling it for what you see, and checking in with people for clarity. And I know I've used that phrase before on your show, but check in for clarity. Help me understand, where you are right now. What's going on for you? And so that's another way of getting a little deeper below the surface as far as what's happening for people in the moment.
We went real deep there. I like that.
Yeah.
We were jumping around like drunk monkeys, and now we're like, okay, back to being sober.
Yeah. Okay. Well, geez. Well, just imagine yourself speeding down the highway, Greg.
Any CHP that ever listens to this, I do not drive a white Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT. I do not drive that Jeep. But Debra, the reason we love having you on our show on a repeated basis is that you are such a fountain of wealth of knowledge. It's unbelievable, and every time you come on, you say something that is just kind of mind blowing on kind of how you can shift your business, your mindset, your verbiage, your understanding of how to view a client in a situation. I mean, I've always said, yeah, I sympathize with my client. I mean, I was saying that today at a client. He called me up. They have like carpet beetles and rat crap falling out of the HVAC, and the whole family's sick with diarrhea and throwing up. And I was saying like, oh man, I totally sympathize, bro. But no, I must empathize.
Yeah. Very good. I mean, if you truly have had that kind of experience, it's okay to acknowledge that. Gosh, I've had something like that happen too. I can really, really understand how you're feeling, and so that's okay if it's genuine, but oftentimes it's not,
No,
Yeah.
We're agents. Of course it's not genuine. But so there's a script called the triple F script, and I want to get your take on if you're empathizing or sympathizing with it. But it goes like this, Debra, I completely understand how you feel. I felt that way when I was trying to buy a house, but what I found was that if I took said action, then I would get said result. So is that empathy or is that sympathy?
That would really be more of a sympathy kind of thing, because you're saying I have a similar experience. Okay.
You've gone through this. Okay.
Yeah. And Greg, I'm going to point out something, and I realize I even used it, and so it's something we all can slip into. But I know from my many years of mediation that people tend to react negatively to this, is when you say, I completely understand how you feel. Whoa, you'll never walk in my shoes. You cannot completely understand how I feel. So I actually encourage people to avoid that kind of verbiage and simply say, I've had a similar, like if you want to say empathy or sympathy, I've had a similar experience. I can only imagine what you're going through right now.
Only imagine.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah, because people, and it's one of the struggles with coaching that makes coaching more difficult, is the idea that everyone is a unique snowflake that has super unique problems and only they can understand, which is, in a coaching relationship, is you have to deal with that. You actually have to confront it. But in a sales conversation, you actually would just want to acknowledge and let them have that and make them feel special, and then kind of adjust your approach to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that it's so important. You talked about rapport. I like to just call it connecting. And connecting can take place in a number of different ways as far as, we're here together to talk about real estate, what's important to you. And I know we've talked about that before on earlier shows as far as the power of open-ended questions, particularly starting with what, try to avoid the why. We know our brains naturally sort of react negatively to the why question. It's important to know our why, but to ask people why they want something, it's harder for people to explain that. And for anybody out there who has had kids, especially in the 2 to 3 year range, their most favorite word is why. And you'll just see parents roll their eyes. I just did a class yesterday with a bunch of young parents. They go, oh, yes, oh, why? Well, we don't really change when we're adults. And so try to stay away from the why question and focus more on the what. What brings you here? What are you looking for? What most appeals to you? What 3 features are you most interested in? And get the conversation going in that way to make some connections and listening to what they have to say.
So do you think that agents sometimes inadvertently and subconsciously tick off or repel potential listing opportunities or buyers by, so why are you selling? Why are you buying? Mm-hmm. Do you think that hits at a subconscious level that might push people away?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So, given, what's prompting this decision to sell right now? Something like that, rather than, so why are you selling?
Even with us just role playing and BS in here, when we were talking about the why and then you reverse it to the what, I felt much more comfortable with you saying, so what's prompting the move? Not, so why are you selling? Mm-hmm. It felt different. I wanted to answer you. What's prompting the move? Well, here's my laundry list of reasons why we're moving. Mm-hmm. Not, why are you moving? And I challenge to everybody who's hearing this right now, change it, post onto my page, post on the Real Estate Uncensored group if you haven't joined it yet, post your experiences and how they may have shifted once you went from a why to a what verbiage in your meetings with clients. I would love, this would be a great beta test.
What's interesting is I always feel bad because, Greg, you give me a hard time for being an emotionless robot, and to an extent I am.
That is so true.
Yeah, but so like I'm self-conscious about that, but Debra, help me understand a little bit going back to the sympathy versus empathy thing, because to me, like I would feel like, you want to emotionally connect more with people, but you're saying like sympathy is like almost focusing on the emotion, empathy is acknowledgement, but it's kind of taken the shared emotional experience out of it and is putting the focus on them and saying like, hey, your emotional experience is unique and I can only imagine what you're feeling. I've gone through some similar things, and so I can kind of imagine, but I can only imagine what you're going through. So the difference between empathy and sympathy is empathy more focused on what and then moving forward, whereas sympathy is focused on the emotion. Like, help me understand that a little bit better.
Okay. Well, it sort of goes back to what I mentioned a little earlier, is that, as individuals, we all feel our own experiences are uniquely our own. You already mentioned that. And so if you were to tell me that, you completely understand how I'm feeling, I'd go, what? You've not walked in my shoes. You don't know what drives what's going on for me. And so to me, that would be a real disconnect for someone to say, oh, yeah, I completely understand how you feel. But if you said something like, gosh, from what you've told me, I've had a similar experience and I know how I felt in that situation. Mm-hmm. Now we have some identity.
Right.
I like the identity. I want to talk about the identity right there, because I think that's something that we could talk a little bit more. Unless, Matt, you have a couple of follow-up questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
The identity, when it comes to, instead of being like Matt, an emotionless robot, you can create your own identity, your own avatar in their mind at that moment, because it's not like, hey, I completely understand it. It's like, dude, I've gone through that. I know I've felt the similar feelings, and this is what I found. Then do you find that people have an emotional bond at that moment because you found a comrade in arms? Like, hey, you've walked in the trenches like me. Do you feel that people could more or less open up to the other person and start telling war stories about something? Well,
yeah. As human beings, we naturally want to connect. Okay, yeah. And so when we can create some kind of shared, experience, even though it's not the same. But I was going, oh yeah, you've had something like that happen too. Oh, okay, there's a connection that happens there that does open the way then for more conversation and to dive deeper.
The funny thing is, it's the super small subtleties that we do and don't do in our businesses, and or in your personal lives that you deem as totally okay and normal, but you don't know that you're offending or repelling maybe a hot chick or a hot dude, whichever flavor you like, maybe a hot seller, hot buyer, just by small. I mean, if you put a series of words in a typical conversation that were like what we're talking about right now, you use the why side, then you have the what side and the different language you would want to put in there. It would be interesting to see how many people we've lost as clients just by not knowing, by using small things, because everybody else goes, why you moving? Why you buying? Instead of the what. Deborah, do you have a sheet like that? Or do you have anything like these are all the why kind of sides, these are all the what kind of verbiage, the ones that would fall in line like that people could download on your site or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm actually working on some new pieces right now, and so give me a few more days and check back, and we'll have it ready, or I'll let you guys know, and you can put it out to your community.
I'm going to stalk you. I want that shit. I didn't know where you live. No, I don't.
I was going to say, I mean, Deborah will be back on the show, so we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about that without Greg stalking you. I feel that would not be good for the rapport building experience.
No.
Greg stalking people. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Okay. So so focusing more on the what. So it's not necessarily an emotional thing. So like getting back into like the rapport building. So what are some signs that you are that you have some more work to do in connecting with people? Because we talked a little bit about like when you walk into a room and like you're not feeling confident, it kind of shows through in your eyes, and there's some different body language that you give off in the networking. We were talking about authentic networking last time, and so you had some really good tips there in terms of like just how we project and what other people can read into. So what are some things that we can look for, just practical body language things in the other person to know when we're connecting and when we're not? Okay.
Yeah, and I will start off, because it sort of builds on what was just said a little bit ago, is that so often we're not aware of, we're not in charge of our own presence and how our presence, is impacting people before we even say anything. And I'll say it again, 55% of how we communicate is through our body language, our behavior, what we see. And 38% is our tone, volume, and inflection. And only 7% of the actual words. And so I always like to say it's not that the words are unimportant, but choosing the right words are even more important because we communicate so much by what we see and what we hear before we even start talking. So just being aware of your presence, I know I'll share some things that I do in mediation that are so translatable to so many walks of life. But, when I'm doing a mediation, I want to make sure I get there in plenty of time. I've got my room set up, and I have a chance to be centered and calm. And so I do my deep breathing, and I'm totally ready when people come. And then I initiate the outreach, welcome, and I introduce myself first, and then, and ask for the introduction back. And so just being mindful of your presence and being prepared in that, because as you said, Matt, so much can come across in the eyes. So if you're not centered and ready to engage, then that can come across. And so what you want to look for in other people then too are things about what do their eyes look like? What do the facial muscles look like? Is there tenseness to their body? And so as you're engaged with people too, by being aware of this, then that's where maybe spending a little bit more time connecting if you see that they are tense, and then even opening it up with, well, what's your objective for today? What do you hope to accomplish? And getting clear right from the very get-go, are they just here for information, or are they actually ready to make a sale, and so that what question becomes very important. But to be mindful then of looking at facial expressions, again, the musculature of their face can say a lot, clenching of the jaw, are they sitting back, are they leaning forward, do you, again, detect sort of tension in their body. And this is where it'd be important to pause and just say, if you could say one thing that's going on in your mind right now, what would that be? And in terms of where are you in this process? And so again, always reverting back to those open-ended questions and to sort of check in with people. And Matt, Greg, you and I talked about this the very first time we met when you used to just fill the silence with more words, right?
Yeah, verbal barf. is what
Yeah,
it really
I call it
was.
verbal vomit. So
We're connecting here, but
yes, we are. So
I think it's.
what did you learn when you learned to pause?
Well, I learned that if you just up and you let the other person talk, a lot of good information comes out. And, I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's every 36 seconds our brain needs to be stimulated, or that's why our brains are constantly racing, or people talk because they're uncomfortable because it has to be fed something to do, it has to be active on doing something. In your, I've been working on shutting up more in front of clients, and your voice comes into my head quite a bit, going, Greg. I'm like, okay, shut up. But I think it's help me. So when it comes to hand gestures, right, and how to make people comfortable with hands, like if you have a clenched hand or hands are hidden, or versus having your palms open where your subconscious can see that you have no weapons in your brain. We've talked about this before. I've experienced something interesting when I've been out door knocking and when I've been out doing pop-bys and stuff like that. All of you guys that are just listening, I have a big fluffy beard that is very thick and beautiful and manly. And I found this. Deborah, do you think that the subconscious brain, when they see a guy with a big beard, is that a threat to the subconscious because you can't see the full face? Because my reactions I've been very different from men and women when I'm door knocking. Like they recoil and they're like shocked. I'm smiling like hi, and they're just like they're going away from me as fast as possible. Is there something to be said there?
Yeah, some people will react more negatively, strongly to beards, and this is, it's very innate even in children, babies. Some babies will cry at men with beards. Not always, but it is because it's. And then when you smile, your teeth are really evident, especially against your dark beard, and so that could come across as almost glaring, or like if you think about a dog baring its teeth.
I gotta shave.
This is Debra, I love you. I think you managed to accomplish what I and many other and possibly an online petition signature campaign all would not have accomplished.
Oh, you goofball.
Well, the brain does react in interesting kinds of ways, and so so it could potentially be doing that for you, Greg, without you knowing it.
Interesting. Okay.
May I make a couple of other comments, Greg?
Oh boy.
You talked about you talked about hand gestures, right?
Yeah.
So pay attention and notice what you experience when I do this. When I go door hanging and I do that, how does that feel?
You're pointing me out. It doesn't feel comfortable when you're like going like this, like I'm in trouble. Right.
So with hand gestures, generally you want to keep your hand gestures between your shoulders and your hips. You don't want to get big enough because some people may perceive that. And I had a mediation case where a manager got angry and threw his hand up, and the employee recoiled, thinking she was going to come down and hit her.
Ooh, wow.
And so again, big actions can be scary to people. You also want to keep an open palm.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. And just want to make sure you can see the video. And so to avoid pointing, having the whole hand in an open palm, again, is a better gesture.
Yeah. Well, I watched a hand gesture TED Talk about this. And to your exact point, Deborah, he said, how do you feel when I do this, do this, do this, or do this? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I like this whole open palm, and it subconsciously shows to your primal brain that I'm not a threat to you. I'm not holding a club, holding a rock, gonna hurt you in some way, shape, or form. You see everything here. Mm-hmm. It goes for the pockets, goes behind the back, the whole thing. But there's also it's a energy thing as well. So Hitler, his whole thing was like this, right? It's a very authoritative move. When you reverse it, it's a very inviting move. And so like you, Deborah, whenever I talk or teach, if you guys ever see me, you'll always see that my palms are always going to be open and probably gesturing like this out to the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you're offering them something. Come, my child, please eat from my palm. That's like, what the hell?
First of all, that's super creepy, but
Yeah.
it is interesting, Deborah. You point out like the range, like the strike zone or whatever, where you want to keep your gestures. I would imagine for someone like Greg that's already 6'4",
5,
even 6'5". Sorry,
like 6'5".
I
Don't
don't
cut
want
an
to
inch off of me.
I don't want to shortchange you, but I would imagine
Literally.
that'd be even more important for someone like you, where if your gestures around your shoulders, it's at the rest of us head height. Like, so you're essentially threatening to knock me unconscious just by making a few gestures at the shoulder. So keep your gestures around your waist, Greg.
Well, Matt, that's inappropriate. This is a family show, okay?
Exactly.
Jeez.
Stomach area. All right, Deborah, you brought up the mediation, so I want to give you a few minutes to share about this, because what we find a lot of times, and there's a great question about for sale by owners that I want to get to at the end of the show, so you guys stick around for that. But speaking of for sale by owners and especially expired listings that they're coming off of a very negative experience with another agent, and a lot of them are disenfranchised and frustrated with the selling process or with agents in general. And then you've got your sellers who are coming into the process, and you might have to flat out tell them that, hey, look, the market just doesn't support the price that you want. Like that's part of why real estate agents exist, unfortunately, is to inject a bit of reality into the expectations. And so a lot of times we feel like we're coming into those conversations and we know there's about to be some conflict, because I'm going to have to tell them something that they don't believe or they're not going to believe right away. And you kind of have to either build your case or you have to invite them to see things your way. And you just know that there's going to be some conflict because you're already coming into it and not agreeing. So I'm curious, like, what advice you would give to people going into that type of situation where they're entering a conversation knowing, I already know the other person has a completely different set of beliefs about what is going to happen or what needs to happen to get their home sold. So how do you handle that type of conflict?
Interesting. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say then is that you have some idea about the nature of the customer's last negative interaction. Is that correct?
Yeah, typically in like a for sale by owner or an expired appointment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. If you've done your pre-qualification right, one of the first things that you'd ask, or like either before you show up or in the course of the first part of the appointment, is, yeah, you would dig a little bit to find out, well, tell me a little bit about, help me understand kind of why you're selling it or why you're thinking about not selling it. Tell me a little bit about the experience. And usually it's either negative about the market, about their agent, about the marketing, or something. They didn't get the result. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you do have some idea of what they're coming out of.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I'm going to go back to, again, using the what question, because if you've got some background then, is that, this would be a good opportunity to sort of say something like, I've done some homework, and I realize that, you've been through this process to some degree, and help me understand what are 3 key things that you liked about the process? What are 3 key things that you didn't like about the process? I always like balancing what you liked and what you didn't like. Mm-hmm. Or what worked well, what didn't work well, and so that way you're getting a feel for how you could help with what they liked, and tie into that, and then you also are very clear about what they didn't like. Yeah. And I limit to 3 just because, or I frame it in 3s because our brains work best around 3s. And so, was there anything else that you'd want to share with me, or that would be important for me to know as we begin to work together?
Yeah. Can you imagine if Dr. Deborah was your listing agent, Greg, and came into an appointment with that, just the spirit, the approach, and that type of line of questioning, just how much people would open up to that?
Well, I wrote it down. It's something that Terry always says, but Deborah, this was so natural for you. You I don't even know what you did, but you started off you rebutted to Matt, and you're like, what I'm hearing you say is, and immediately I'm like, oh, she's going to tell me something nice. She likes what I'm saying. Okay, she's understanding me. I'm like, wait, snap out of it, Greg. But just verbal ninja moves. But it's for the best interest. It's not a manipulative, move that you're doing. You're genuinely trying to understand what's going on, and you're putting them at ease. You're empathizing with them, not sympathizing with them, and you're really trying to find the root. And I think what you do is just mind-blowing. You should put together a whole language for listing presentations and working with buyers and sell it to agents. Matt and I'll take a 75% cut.
You handle
Which,
all the
by the way,
production.
guys,
Okay, I'll do that.
yeah, exactly. That doesn't sound like a good idea. But Deborah, we did work with her to put together a course called The Introvert's Guide to Sales Success. I put the link to that earlier in the Facebook comments. But for anybody that's listening or kind of watching after the fact and you don't see the link, just go to our website, reuncensored.com/introvert. And so that has a lot of these strategies. And whether you're an introvert or not, you could be an extrovert and still get a lot of value out of the course because it's about communication strategies. And Deborah, you cover some of these things in there, but especially if you would consider yourself an introvert, which I know a lot of people in our audience do, that is an amazing course. It's 90 minutes of material where we go deep into how to apply these communication strategies to real estate. So some of that work is done, and it is in that course. I just wanted to point that out real quick.
So, Deborah, I might be throwing you under the bus, and it's not my intention to, but could a brokerage or a team or an agent hire you to work on their verbal skills? I mean, is that something?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I do is I help teach people how to capture their presence so they really can connect, listen, and engage. And so that's where, the program's called Emotional Intelligence, and that's really where, I work with people. I have a 90-day, what I call a 90-day leadership wonder program. And so it is a couple of intensive days of training to lay the foundation around emotional intelligence, communication strategies, conflict dynamics. And so we take a look and slice and dice at our behavior in several different ways. And then it's combined with one-on-one coaching with each of the participants. And we come back with a couple of follow-up training sessions to continue building those skills. And in fact, I'm just finishing up a project here in Coronado, and we've got one more training in January. And so, but yeah, and people it really is about empowering people to feel confident, to know their strengths, know where their weaknesses are to work on. And I want to share something with you that I was reminded of in a training program I did a few weeks ago, is that at any given time, we're unconsciously incompetent. Unconsciously incompetent. We don't know what we don't know, okay? We want to move, though, to being consciously incompetent. We want to know what we don't know so we can continue to build and lead and grow. Then we get to a point of being consciously competent, and that's where a lot of people function. We know what we know. We're good at what we do. But actually, and it sort of reflects on what Greg just said a moment ago, is that I may not even realize I'm doing it anymore because this is part of who I am. But we want to get to a point of where we're unconsciously competent, where we've embodied these skills and strategies and ways of doing things in ways we don't even have to think about anymore.
Yeah.
It just becomes part of us.
I mean, in all transparency, Matt and I make nothing off of Deborah's coaching. This is not something we're pitching and putting out there for you guys because we make a dime off of it. I would highly recommend that if you're a new agent or a couple of new agents or however this works with your packaging, guys, hire her for these 90 days. Understand that you become a verbal ninja so that when you go out against a seasoned agent, you can work with the same arsenal of verbiage that they have over decades of time, and you can get it in 90 days. I mean, I really think that could be a massive leg up for a lot of agents or teams or brokerages, or if you're trying to break into a market, or you're number 2 and you want to become number 1, whatever the situation is, guys. I mean, I'm literally taking notes over here as quickly as my little hands can write.
Well, that's why you invite me on the show. You get me free, right?
Exactly. That's you're thinking. You see our ways now, Deborah. Damn.
That's
figured this out.
All right. What was I going to say? There was something besides making fun of Greg's small hands, which believe me, I could go on for 10 minutes about that. And we'll just close out the show with that because I think it's funny that Greg actually called himself out and said he had tiny hands.
I do not.
But
have
anyway,
tiny hands, jackass.
Tiny hands. Oh, I know what it was. It was listing, just the listing appointments, right? So one of the things that you mentioned, like Greg, that experienced agents, they have 30 years of experience, and they're so far ahead of most agents. I would push back on that a little bit, and unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that have been in real estate for 30 years, and essentially they've done the same year 30 times over. Everybody in real estate is not your dad. Like your dad has this amazing, very authentic client-first mentality that's led to the way that he talks and the way that he deals with people. And I don't think most, even top listing agents, don't necessarily have that. And one of the things that was really interesting, Greg, when we interviewed Derek Evans. So Derek is here in San Diego, and he ran a TV show, still runs a TV show, where they do nothing but send in with a camera crew into a home of an actual couple who are selling their home. They give them 3 top agents to choose from, and they record all the appointments. Right, so Deborah, imagine this scenario where you can actually get an inside look and you can A/B test, like, hey, this is top agent number 1, 2, and 3. Let's see who actually gets the real listing. Right, they're actually selling their home, and they're going to go with one of the 3 agents that the television show pitches them. So you actually get to see like the appointments, and what he found was that the agent who builds trust and rapport gets the listing, I don't know, 90, 95% of the time. And so, Deborah, this really is, as much as we talk about marketing and all those things are important and we need to serve our clients at a high level and actually get their home sold, but it's amazing how much in the actual appointment, the actual meeting with an actual seller, how many times it comes down to, Deborah, what you teach, which is the building a real connection with somebody and giving them the space to share their feelings and their thoughts and just being the one that they connect with the best, which is really surprising to someone like me.
Hmm. That, I know Derek. I haven't seen him for a while, but I know of his show and how he's developed that. I'll have to follow up with him. But yeah, trust is the bedrock of any, the foundation of any relationship. And trust, we get to trust by being consistent and predictable to create stability. And part of trust then is integrity, sincerity, compassion, reliability, I could go on and on, but I always ask people, in fact, I just did a webinar yesterday about that and just ask people to say, just stop and take a look at these words and where do they fit in your lives? Are they really part of who you are? Or maybe this is something you can work on, because that's part of the emotional intelligence piece. It starts with self-awareness, just who am I? And how do I come across? And then it's self-management. Now that I know who I am and what triggers me and maybe I emotionally react sometimes, then how can I manage that in a way that people actually still want to engage with me? And that's something I try to put out there too, is are we engaging with others in a way that they want to engage with us? Because we naturally are attracted towards positivity and we repel, we run from negativity. And so being mindful of all these pieces that we pull together in terms of, how we come across. And then it's about other awareness. And so taking what you know about yourself and then being attentive to the clues in other people. And that's where, when we first started off, we talked a lot about DISC, the communication styles, and how to recognize where somebody might be coming from in how they conduct themselves, the questions they ask, and things like that. And then you use all that information then to manage that relationship. So those are the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff, and I wish we had time to dive more into detail. But yeah, that's one thing I do want to spend a future show on, Deborah, is just that the initial couple of pieces, the self-awareness. How do we build our self-awareness, and then how do we manage because we've been spending time in that quadrant in terms of like managing how we come across. But I would love to dig into like the self-awareness piece and how we expand that, because I think that's one piece that we are missing. We can work on how we come across, but if we really don't start with who are we, we're kind of starting in the middle of it and just kind of making very tactical, kind of around the margin little adjustments and things like that without really understanding who we are and how we're coming across. So there's a foundation I think that we could do a better job of laying on a future episode.
Great, yeah, because I think when I look at some of the real estate or sales in general kind of approaches, it's sort of like a cookie cutter approach. With, you do this, you do this, you do this, without really any understanding of who's delivering it and how well that fits. And so that's why
because every sales trainer just essentially they're saying, hey, here's how to be like me. If you're a high D, high I, here's how to sell. And then they build an entire system around what's worked for them, which works very well. If you happen to have the same DISC profile and the same motivating factors, you can plug into that and you can do very well. And then the people that don't fit in and don't have the same values and don't have the same DISC profile try to imitate it and try to model it, and it doesn't work for them. And then they think it's their fault, which is a big problem.
Yeah. Right. That's something that's very, very true. I mean, Midori, who used to sit right behind me, she was a driver, but man, was not a hardcore caller, hardcore follow-up person. Everything that our team is based on, hardcore outbound prospecting. It just wasn't her, and I think that's very interesting that you have to understand the DISC and not demonize someone who's different than you, and you just figure out how to work with them on their team and how to help grow them. But a lot of times they don't even know how to do it. And then actually, Deborah, back to you talking about the DISC. We have the two founders, Matt and I are going to be working with the two founders from Wise Hire. Really cool company. I think they're down in San Diego with you guys, or they're somewhere down. I'll probably be talking out of my ass. I don't know where they are. But, they are going to come on. Jay and Zeb, they're going to be coming on our show on a recurring basis, and they are the creators of the DISC profile for Tony Robbins. Oh. And I really getting to know your DISC. I mean, if you guys just go to Tony Robbins /DISC, and you can take your DISC profiles and really get to know who you are. And I think that's a true point, really understanding who you are first and what makes you tick, and then, kind of go out from there. I would love to do that just for myself and, really kind of dive deeper on that, because 2018, 17 was not a very good year for me business-wise. I took a lot of my focus off, and I focused on the show and some other things. So I need to understand me better to understand how I can grow more in 2018.
Yeah. Well, I've got some suggestions for you, Greg.
Oh, shut up, Johnson.
Yeah. Well, we want to wrap things up, and then I've got one last question that I want to throw you, Greg, about for sale by owners that I think would be really helpful to people. So before I do that, Deborah, how do people reach out and connect with you?
Well, I would love to have people reach out on Facebook, Dr. Debra Dupree, and like me, join my page, all that kind of stuff, and I post my events there as well. I haven't quite gotten to Facebook Live. That's my 2018 goal. But Facebook is definitely a way. I'm on LinkedIn, and also visit my website at www.relationships-at-work.com. And they can certainly text me, and we can set up a time to talk at 619-432-5073.
It's dangerous territory, giving out your cell phone on the air. I appreciate the correction. Greg did that for a year, and now he's booked out for like 18 freaking months and has no life.
Okay.
I only have 4 more months of that left.
Okay, good.
Until April of next year, and then I am Dunskies.
Very good.
I get my next
Okay. So Greg, Marvin had a great question. It's about for sale by owners. Is it okay to set an appointment even though they're not looking to list with an agent? Is it an opportunity to turn things around when you get there?
Oh, mamacita, yes. I mean, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been having incredible success about calling the Make Me Moves on Zillow and presenting them with a value add option, and then just getting in the door, building the rapport, the relationship, the trust, giving them value. I'm going to do a Facebook Lives promoting their property, talking, showing all the qualities and highlights of the home. And I've had resounding successes on that for this last week when I did calls. So I think for FSBOs, I think, absolutely get in there, bring value to them. It is a hard job to sell a home, for the person who doesn't do it on a daily basis. There are a lot of landmines you can step on and blow your leg off, and the deal goes sideways, or they get sued, or they don't get the highest price, or whatever it's going to be. So be that resource that they can give to them fully, so that if they decide to, use an agent, you can be top of mind. 100,000% I would get on every single appointment you possibly can, because those are also potential pocket listings that no one else knows about for the most part, and you can then talk about those with a running list at open houses if everything isn't working. Now you have the real secret MLS, right? So 100,000% yes. Put a package together. Matt, who did we have on the show that actually has a very detailed, who was it? A very detailed, FSBO program. Oh, shit. What was his name?
Are we talking about Michaelston Lee or Brandon Mulrennan?
I think it was Brandon. Yeah.
Okay.
And that program, go back and watch that show, guys.
Yeah.
He has a very detailed step-by-step program on how to do it. And he sees a lot of success off of it. And he and I did a Facebook Live together, too.
Yeah, I think he sold 100 homes in his first year.
Yeah, just by
Just
doing that.
absolutely ridiculous. Just killed it. Yeah. And then Deborah, you mentioned that one of your goals for 2018 is to go live on Facebook more, or start kind of jumping into that world. And I know there's a lot of people in our audience that are the same way. Kind of they can feel that they need to be doing it and they know the benefits of it, but they haven't taken that step. So guys, we have a free training on all about how to find your next client on Facebook Live. So just go to goliveonfacebook.com. That's where you'll find that. That's a free video training. We also throw in some bonuses there on social media, just how to get started, how to find the right network for you, how to start building relationships on Facebook specifically. So there's some great stuff there. So make sure to go there. And then, so we talked about how to connect with Deborah. Greg, how do people connect with you?
Guys, best way to connect with me is Facebook Follow Me. That would be the easiest way to do anything. Follow me, send me a private message in Messenger for Facebook. I'll get back with you, video, audio, or written text. It's the simplest, easiest. Then I can keep track of all of our conversations and where they all are. I think, Matt, you and I decided we're not going to do coaching again. But we are going to be doing training, guys. I'll put a link in here, guys, for $200. And I'm going to give you a $100 coupon. It's usually $300, but it's going to be $200. On January 10th, Hank Avix and I are going to fire off a coaching for 4 weeks for $197 total, and you get a ton of value on this. It's going to lay the foundation for a relationship building business. So we'll show you how to use send out cards. We'll show you how to work your sphere of influence, how to work your social media in a very positive, enlightening, and fun way. And for $200, guys, shit. I mean, come on. You can't get that kind of value anywhere else. I'm not kidding. So I'll put that link in there, but that's how you guys can get a hold of me. Facebook follow or friend me. Well, don't friend me. Follow me. And then send me a message.
Yeah. And then for me, guys, if you have questions about, like I mentioned, Deborah's program that we put together with her, we've got a couple of other programs on lead generation of various kinds. And then we've got, obviously we have a lot of guests that do programs, they do coaching, they do all this kind of stuff. Guys, if you need just a second opinion and impartial strategic advice and guidance on kind of what the next step is for you, just book a call on my calendar. It's 15.bookjohnson.com. I'm happy to spend 15 minutes with you because there's a couple of questions that you answer before you show up to that call so that I can show up prepared and ready to help. And even if it's just to steer you in the right direction or answer some questions about, let's say, Dr. Deborah and her program, or if there's another coach that we've had on the show that you're curious about and you want to get some guidance on whether you should sign up with them or whether you should buy, this or that course, just hop on the phone. I'm happy to help. 15.bookjohnson.com. And then just like Greg, you can follow me on Facebook. So for the show itself, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, or Stitcher, depending on whether you want the video or audio and whether you have a Apple or an Android device. Go to our website. One of the comments that we got here was, how do you find Brandon Mulrenan's episode? The best way is just to go to reuncensored.com. So all of our back episodes are there. If there's something you can't find, message me and let me know, and I will find it for you. And with that said, guys, Greg, you want to send us home?
I do. All right, guys, we love you. That's why we're here. So keep spreading this out to your friends and family and fellow agents. We really want to make sure that our impact is going to be a positive one on the industry. We have a true love affair with every one of you. We want to see you just be the absolute best you possibly can be. That's why Deborah is here with us on a recurring basis. She is a mental linguist ninja, and she is going to keep coming back and keep just dropping nugget bombs on all of you guys. But until next time, peace out, ninjas. Be gone.